My question to the group is, are you interested in my spiritual journey so far and the experiences, or just the experiences so far? Because a lot of people already know me, a lot of people don't know me, what I have gone through.
Spiritual journey and experience.
Okay. Right, that's what I'm saying. Some
Whichever
people know me,
doesn't
some
take
people
too
don't
long.
know me, right?
Whichever doesn't take too long.
We studied together.
Let's be honest.
Very good.
75.
Wow. So my journey started accidentally. Before it started, I thought I knew everything about life. That you have to be a nice person, and as long as you don't want to cheat anybody, you don't want to hurt anybody, try to help everybody, that's good enough. Once I bumped into a book fair in Meadowlands, and I had gone to pick up my mother-in-law. She believed in a lot of these havans and things like which was happening over there. And while I was waiting, I had no interest in going into havans and rituals, and I was always anti-rituals all along. And my upbringing had been as a science student, of course, and all the questions and answers and logic and arguments and all those things were routine part of my life, right? Good thing was I was never like forced into any one particular religion, even though we were Jains by birth and by culture and by, but I was never really forced into it. Like we dabble a little bit here and there. My parents sent me to some pathshalas and all that. Didn't click. It just didn't appeal to me somehow. And going to the derasars and doing rituals, I always kept asking why. Why are we doing all this? And nobody had answers. There were lots of people doing pratikramas, including my parents. 45 minutes, an hour they will do but it was all in the Magdi language, and they had no explanation what they're actually doing. So I always felt dissatisfied with the religions that I knew. So I never had a taste into going into all these things. So I was waiting outside, and I saw a book on Gita by Aurobindo. The only reason I picked up the book was, one, I love to read. I loved to read all my life. And one, it was by Aurobindo, and two, because it had a beautiful cover. It had a Takshashila's very artistic statue on it. So it made me interested in it. And I brought the book home, couldn't understand a word of it. Aurobindo himself is a great saint, and his language was superbly high, and all the explanations just started flying through. So I put it away. Couple of years later, I attended one of my friends, Deep Foods people, Arvind Amin, and they were my patients. So their father turned 100, and so I attended his birthday party, and they gave out Gita by Chinmayanand. And so I brought that home, and I still dabbling and all that. So one day I was looking up Aurobindo's Gita again. I said, I already have spent money on it, might as well try to understand again. But still, I couldn't understand. Then later on, suddenly I realized that I had that book by Chinmayanand, same thing, Gita also. So I started comparing. I said, maybe different people might explain in a different way. But then it was like a day and night difference. His language was very simple and very flowing with the logic that I had. Not that there was anything wrong with Aurobindo's Gita, and it's just the way of explanation of Chinmayanand was just amazing. And I went through all that. It took me 6 months to read 1100-page book. Sometimes one page would take me like 45 minutes to read. This is not just a regular novel that you read and put it away. You have to read, comprehend, and put it in a context with your day-to-day life of what's going on. Otherwise, it loses its value. So they call Sanatana Dharma for nothing. They don't say that for nothing, because at any stage of life, I realized that all these facts which are mentioned in Gita, and at that time, my main problem that I was facing was my patients. A lot of them were obese, a lot of them were diabetics, a lot of them are high cholesterols. And I started reading different slokas of Gita, and I said, my God, these people, what they knew in 2,500 years back, if that can be used in today's age, the solution is right there. And little by little, I started realizing there is a spiritual solution for every single problem. Of course, psychological problems, the anxiety, stress, and grief and all that, there were answers in Gita. But I realized that all the physical diseases are also nothing but creation of spiritual misadjustment. And if the spiritually people become stable, then their variations and the fluctuations of the mind also will slow down, their behavior will change, and then ultimately we won't have the diseases. The thing that helped me a lot also was my running, because my cholesterol and my triglycerides used to be high, and I started running and I just couldn't run, and I had to run. And one day I listened to a radio, and there was an interview being taken of a Spanish guy. He ran marathon at the age of 80. And they were asking me, so they said, you must be running all your life, otherwise how can you run 26 miles at the age of 80, right? So at that point he said that, no, I started running at the age of 70. He started running at 70, he finished marathon at 80, and I was 33 at that time. I couldn't run. I went to Brookdale Park, 2 minutes, and I was out of breath. I said, this is a shame. We used to play Ubiko with the kids, they used to tire me out and huffing and puffing. And so, and these two things have connection. That's why I'm saying it, not just to talk about my running career. But so I said, I'm going to do it no matter what. So I would run 2 minutes, I'll walk 2 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes. Then it started getting cold, because it started in September. Then it was like October, November. So I will run 15 minutes in freezing cold. I'll come back in the car, warm up the car 15 minutes, and then run again. So after a while, I started running half an hour continuously without any problem. And I continued for several years. What I realized was the path that I was taking, the spiritual path, there was nothing to gain financially, materially, or fame-wise or anything like that. But it just started making me generate a desire to help my patients. And the running helped me to get the physical, my physical capacity increased quite a bit. And literally, my energy started flowing. Even without me knowing or without me defining the energy flowing and around. And now at this point, after several years of meditation, I have realized that you're unlocking a lot of energy which is stored in a literally dead tissues, which are sitting there holding on to the energy E equal to mc square. All the mass converts into energy, and now the energy has started taking over. And it is up to you to utilize whichever you want it. So all the things were happening parallel at the same time. And of course, Chinmayanan, I was just so impressed. All the flow of the knowledge was just going through. And then, of course, I picked up every single book written by Chinmayanan. I would go to Chinmaya Mission in Ahmedabad. I'll pick up this big mountain of books. And he says, very few people buy. But nowadays in India, he says, nobody comes from here. We had only 2 buyers in the last 6 months. I said, who else was the guy? He said, well, he's a doctor from California. And that's it. Nobody touches these books anywhere. And I felt, for me, this was like a treasure that I was going through. And every single page, every single line, I have underlined everything. And it never stopped. I went through Kanopnishad, Kathopnishad, Vivek Chudamani, Atma Bodha, you name it, whatever Chinmayanan had written, I read about it. And once I was in Barnes and Nobles, I bumped into Vasistha's Yoga Vasistha. That is the only scripture which is spoken by man to the God. All the other scriptures, in a way, they were spoken by gods and preached to the people. This is the only scripture spoken by Vasistha Muni to Ram when he was young. And so far I had accumulated a lot of spiritual background. And I was interpreting day-to-day experiences in a spiritual way, and I was advising the patients right and left, and I saw the results right away. For example, one of my patients was, after only reading Gita even, now I say only reading Gita, meaning I have gone through a lot of other things which are so much more superior to Gita, but at the same time, Gita is one of the best, books ever written. Meanwhile, my Jainism background was taking total backstage because I tried reading Tattva Sutra and all those things. I started attending and I was proud of the principles of non-violence and all that, but I never come across any good explanations of why and what the details and the way I had come across Chinmayan. So for me, Hinduism was taking over quite a bit, and I started considering myself a Hindu at that point. I mean, this is again a part of the journey, so I have again gone a long way. So Hinduism was more applicable, more understandable, and more practical to me at that point. So the journey goes on, and I started using these things on a day-to-day practice. One of my patients came to me, there was a Christian couple, and at that time I had started having a broader outlook. This couple came because they had 2 daughters and they were very upset, and they wanted to have a special meeting with me. At the end of the day, I usually keep an hour or whatever it takes kind of meetings with them. I said, all right, come at the end of the day and we'll talk. So their problem was that, that one of our daughters is good, but the other daughter has gone into lesbianism. And we are really against, as a Christian, we don't believe in this. We took both our kids, to the classes and the church and everything. And yet, we are very disappointed. We want to break off the relationships and all that. Now, by now, I had a good spiritual background as far as what are your duties and what are your identification. As a male, you should be the best possible son, you should be the best possible brother, best possible father, best possible husband, and the 5th one is your profession. You have to be the best possible. You have to give your 100%. So I went through a lot of discussions with him, and then I told them, I said, doesn't matter whatever she does. I said, you are a father, and you cannot not be a father. Even if you try till the end of your life, you're going to be a father in whatever form. And by cutting off the relationship, you're breaking off your duty as a father. And if you do not perform your duties, just like Krishna told Arjuna, that you are the archer, it is in your hands to do whatever is required at this moment. So without that, if you break away from your duties, you're going to be hurting a lot of people, and the balance of the sansar will be disturbed, and you will be the culprit, and you will suffer. So I explained to him that till you die, you cannot not be a father, and it's going to haunt you. So they listened to me, they calmed down, and they continued the relationship. And then they moved to South Jersey. They would travel 3 hours, till they would come and see me. He says, Doc, you really saved our family. And then later on, after 6-7 years, they gave me the good news that she was getting married.
Converted
and then
back.
a couple of years later, and she had a boy also. So now they are very happy, and so I saw the power of spirituality. It did not necessarily make me feel that I'm a better doctor. It doesn't really matter. But what matters is the truth and the power of spirituality on a day-to-day settings. I started getting the power, the realizing the importance of spirituality is. So a lot of examples took place, and I had another a cop who was my patient, and a white guy, and he was doing a duty in Irvington, and he was shaking. He came on one of the Monday nights when we had late hours, and he says, Doc, give me some Xanax or do something. I said, what happened? He says, I shot a black guy, and a white cop, killing a black guy, He says, but I said, tell me what happened. So he said that we had been following this guy for a long time. He had a lot of track records, criminal record, and things like that. And finally, we did, located him in the downtown Irvington. And then I started flashing, and I called the backup that they can come because this guy had, was known to have weapons. So the backup was still on the way, and he realized the guy pulled over. He complied, so there was no problem. But I realized that there were 3 kids in the car, so I knew I didn't want to shoot. So I told the backup also, I said, no guns until we think we are safe to nab him, right? But the good thing was that he was, pulling over. But then as soon as he pulled over, the cop went behind him. He started telling the kids, just run away, just get out of the car, get out of the car. 2 kids got out. One girl was still on the way, in the process of getting out, still in the doorway, and he took off. And she was still holding on to the door. And I thought that she was going to die if she fell off the car or something. So I had to shoot him. And went through the neck, and he died. He says, I can't explain all these things that happen to the people. And of course, the press is going to take me in a negative way, and I don't know what to do. They put me at St. Barnabas psych unit, and they released me at the end of the day. They said there is no psych problem, but obviously the problem was there. From spiritual point of view, he was very disturbed, and he needed the pills to, So of course, it was Monday night. There were a lot of people waiting, but I thought it was my duty to explain to him whole Gita. So I explained to him the whole process, how the Mahabharata took place, how the Krishna and the role of Krishna and Arjuna and all those things. I said, you were on the line of duty. If you did not do your duty as a police officer, you would be doing a crime against the spirituality. So he understood the whole concept, and he says, Doc, that's the best advice I ever got. Now I can wake up tomorrow morning, I can fight the whole world. On the way out, he tells my secretary, he says, you're working for one of the best doctors. I said, it's not me. It's not me. If it was me, I would not have picked up all these things. Come to me 10 years back, I probably would have given you Xanax and you go home. That would have been the end of that. You are on your own. But this spiritual insight started waking up in me. So all along, all these books were helping me and underlined everything, read everything. Some of the books I read 2 times, 3 times, until I came across Vasishtha's Yoga. And that was a turning point in my life. Vasishtha's Yoga is the 3rd largest book ever written in the world. And it was written in 1253, 800 years back. And then, of course, and it was translated. But original book is in Sanskrit. And the version, I can read Sanskrit, but not really understand it that well. So Swami Venkatesananda has translated. It's a 700-page book, very fine print. And they say that once you finish the book in 3 lives, you will reach enlightenment. And I thought it was just a lot of bull. So I didn't believe all these things, and I don't believe in all these things, enlightenment. All those things are so remote for me. So for me, it was just, I was reading another book. And it was very difficult to understand. If Gita is here, Vasishtha's Yoga is up there on the top. And there is no way you can compare. And I could read the confidence with which the book is written, that I could understand where the author was coming from. Now, we still believe it is the Vasishtha's Muni, and that was in the written form. Spoken form was thousands of years back, because Ram used to exist in the Drupal Yoga and all those thousands and thousands of years back. I said, there's so much wisdom in this. And still, first time when I read, and when I say first time, I read it 3 times. So it is very difficult book to understand. So when I read it first time, a lot of things just flew through me, despite my lot of background of Chinmayanand and all those things. So I was getting ready for the spiritual bath, basically, right? So all these things were going on and on and on, and then I could understand some part of it, and then it was fitting. So a lot of juggling was going on, all because of the intellectual reasonings just didn't want to die out. And I was not ready to give up. So all these things came in, and then I bumped into a gentleman called Mr. Vijay Trivedi. And that also was a very accidental connection. Because I was at the mandir, and when they were having a concert, and then in the middle he declared that he's a yoga teacher, and they had just started. So one of my patients, she was there. She didn't even know him, but they were just chatting for a few minutes. And apparently she had some other things to do, so she walked away. And he says, oh, you talk to him. Maybe he want to do yoga. And I always wanted to do yoga. So we bumped into each other. And I told him I was very excited, and under the guidance of Chinmayanand, I was, meditation at home and things like that. It was already helping me. So I told him, he says, I know. I said, how do you know? He says, your eyes, you can tell, they're so steady. I said, I didn't know that. So he could pick up that I was meditating. And then, of course, we started, and I was still not there yet. Of course, I had a long way to go. But my interest in meditation, in the spirituality was full and thriving. And I was so excited to talk about it. So then he said that, why don't you talk on spirituality or Gita or whatever? Because all the slokas that I read, and the one that I liked the most was Dhyato Vishyam Punsa. That's where the Vishya is the objects of pleasure. And in 2 slokas, there was a beautiful cascade how a man at a very high level breaks down into the lowest level. How I call that axis of evil. Dhyato Vishyam Punsa Sangateshu Upjayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kama Krodha Abhijayate Krodha Bhavati Sammoha Sammoha Smruti Vibram Smruti Vrishat Buddhanasha Buddhinasha Pranashyati Sarvanasham Pranashyati. So starting from a man who had no problem, had nothing but a serene mind, with like a serene lake, without any vibrations, without any impulses, how he gets into the influence of the material objects, and how the tango starts, the dance starts between the man and the objects of pleasure. And when the objects of pleasure becomes the main thing, you don't even listen to your friends, your relatives, your well-wishers. Doesn't matter, that object becomes the only thing. And then ultimately the objects making you go around like the cobra, dances at the flute player's tune, and ultimately there is a downfall and the man perishes. When he could have been the supreme human being, Chinmanan calls it Superman. You could have been a Superman, but now he's down in the dumps, worse than an animal. So that slope to me was the real practical applications. And you could trace everything back, where everybody was a genuinely innocent when they were born as a kid, and how you pick up all these objects of pleasure, whether it's money or fame or sex. So the spirituality started giving me a broader vision of not just condemning one person or the other. And then I got another example of a couple, which is many years back, and the wife was addicted to smoking, right? And I told her, I said, she had come for a visit. Her husband was addicted to food. He was extremely obese and all that. And I always was focused on losing weight. And I said, maybe, so when she was there for my appointment with me, so I told her, I said, we should work on Brian. He really has to lose a lot of weight. And she gave me a beautiful answer. He says, I'll do it when I give up my smoking. So that we realized that we all are addicted to something, if not one thing. So nobody's immune to addiction. That's why we are going around in samsara and trying to do things and achieve things. There is always something behind our mind that we are focused on to achieve something. Nothing wrong with achieving, as long as you can understand your true nature also.
What are you addicted to?
I don't know, addicted to right now? Addicted to remove the addiction.
Curiosity.
Right. So the thing is that you start realizing across the board how spirituality can be helpful to lots and lots of people. So that's how the journey went in. And then, of course, then we started doing the yoga, and then I started talking about spirituality, and we started having lectures, and those lectures helped me quite a bit to get me ready and to share my experiences and things like that. So, of course, being a science student, I had a lot of interest in science also. So I said, I cannot accept the science and spirituality as a two separate thing. Otherwise, a lot of people nowadays have scientific mind. To them, spirituality will have no value at all. And then life can be lived. God is not, indispensable. You can live without God. You can live without consciousness. Totally whole your life, and you will not have any regrets, because the objects of pleasures are always there to go more and more and more deep. And science has provided. If you get fed up with one, there is always another one to replace. So iPhone always have new versions. So there is never a dearth of objects of pleasure. So I realized that where does the knowledge of God or realization of God fits in? Because this thing has been preceding the science for such a long time. where does that fit into scientific world like this? So my interest was always in the quantum physics and the scientific principles. And when I started reading more on the quantum principles and all that, I realized and discovered magazines and a lot of sources I had. And I read a book called Tao of Physics. Tao means a way of life. And Tao of Physics was one of the best sellers for a long time, written by Capra, K-A-P-R-A. Capra was a physicist working on the linear accelerator, which goes across hundreds of miles. It's so big. And I read his book. One chapter will be on the physics. Second chapter will be on spirituality, some Eastern mysticism. It will be on Jainism or Hinduism or Buddhism. Another chapter on science, another chapter on mysticism. And this guy started putting two things together somehow. And it started making sense to me. What they do in the linear accelerator, they fire an atom at a high speed, almost 186,000 miles per second. Another atom B coming from the other side. They would let it smash. And that will generate a lot of subatomic particles. Subatomic particles that you could actually measure, you could photograph, and they will have a fixed time frame. They will be created, they will be existing, and then they will disappear. The strange things that the physicists were coming across was, if you measure the mass of atom A, and if you measure the mass of atom B, and then put it together, you would think the subatomic particles, if you add up all of them together, should be same. A plus B should be all the total weight of the subatomic particles, but it wasn't. It was always more. And they had no way to explain to this, right?
God's particle, right?
Yes, God's particles. So my interest into quantum physics and got so deeper. So their theory was there is a there is an energy field which is present, which is throughout everywhere. When it gets disturbed with a major event like smashing atoms at such a high speed, it generates subatomic particles. So some of these particles are generated out of that energy field. So E equal to mc square. So the mass is generated because m is the mass and c is the speed of light multiplied by square. So square of it. All that combined turns into energy. So the first time I started having the clue how to connect the spirituality with the mass that we see around. So that's where they realized that the same way, then I started applying that knowledge that we are also mass. We are also made out of, in a bigger scale, nothing but subatomic particles, because subatomic particles create the atoms and atoms create the molecules, and all the molecules create us. And just like the subatomic particles, which had a fixed span of 2 seconds or 2 minutes or 2 hours, we also have a fixed span. Just the matter. As a matter, the rules of the matter is that we all have to go through the same thing, just like the subatomic particles, birth, growth, decay, and death. And all these things, going back into the spiritual books, we're saying the same thing. So now, again, because of the correlationship, I was getting more and more excited, because now it started making more and more sense to me. So the journey goes on, and then, of course, finally we do a retreat. Was the first time, because so far samadhi was only a question of in the books, right? It always in the books until we actually had the first-hand experience of the samadhi. And so that was the most beautiful thing that ever happened in my life, because it was my desire, because I was doing all these things, meditation, reading books and all that, but there was never an actual experience. And when it happened to everybody, and then it lasted for at least 2-3 days, that we were feeling lightweight and all these things, was an actual samadhi state. So that's when I realized, but my progress is always controlled by my self-guidance rather than any external situations needed for me to go into that samadhi. So I said, samadhi, I should be able to reproduce on my own, not necessarily with the help of surrounding factors. So I looked at the retreat as a great help, at least making me realize, because at that point I had said that it's probably all in the books, I'm gonna die without ever experiencing the state of samadhi, right? But I did. So then it made my efforts more into that direction. But I always believed in my self efforts. So in anything, not just the spirituality, I like to be independent, pretty much anything, as much as I can. So I continued my own progress into spirituality. I would experiment all the guidelines set by the Guruji and all these things, and ultimately you have to find out what suits for you. So I started doing, for me it worked out because I already had energy, powerhouse available because of my running and all these things, and I realized that I release a lot of energy in myself after the running. And that kind of sets the conditions, what Guruji says, that you should be somewhat hungry and somewhat tired. So for me, I would do meditation at the end of my running. And then a lot of times, we have a lot of woods in the area, I would go into the woods. And I realized that going into the samadhi state was so much easier. And then of course, I started experiencing samadhi state. Samadhi state is beautiful because it's really a thoughtless state, and it's very enjoyable and very peaceful. So I started going into the states much more easily if I was in the middle of the woods, where I would see the leaves and the wind and the trees. And so I was always a nature lover, photographing so one thing I have realized that what helped me was taking your path on your own without worrying about what has been told to you by somebody. So at that point, even the Hinduism, and I did not go into the rituals or statue worships and things like that. But I said there has to be something more than this. So then I realized that it's that vast open consciousness that the statues are supposed to remind you of. But ultimate journey is a lot more beyond that. So that journey I wanted to take. So started going into all these things, and I started experiencing samadhi states and all that. But still for many years, still ultimately they say aham brahmasmi and all these things, it still was a talk to me. Meditation was happening, samadhi state was happening, but the actual shift of consciousness, it takes a while, because in your day-to-day experiences, you do it all the time. That's when my lectures themselves help me, because every time I prepare a lecture, it takes me almost a week to prepare a lecture, because I go through my day-to-day experiences, I put my input into all these things. Of course, on top of that, listening to Osho helped me a lot, because he gives you very practical examples of how the consciousness behaves in certain way and how your ego can play the roles, because the ultimate goal of spirituality is to come out of your ego structure and then realize your infinite structure. Because ego, it creates the likes and dislikes, and it locks you into only one aspect of the society, and another aspect of the society gets neglected, and all that because of the sensual enjoyment. At any sense, whether you use the sense of hearing or touch or smell, I like this, I don't like this. Immediately the compartments are created. So the duality is continuously present. We live the life of duality, we breathe duality, we perform dualities, everything. All our actions are controlled by the duality. But still, to experience the Advait state is very difficult, because we are forced into dual state all the time. So how can you remain non-dual in a dual life? So that was a very big challenge for me. So the shift of consciousness has to take place. Without that, you're still not there yet. So samadhi state, I found out, was only the entry level. From samadhi state is only to experience the non-dual state, but to have a belief in it and to cut out your attachment to the ego self, that I am not the body and I am not the mind. Mind and body becomes a distant objects. So again, reading from various sources, giving lectures, and then of course continue to pursue the meditation. Ultimately, the shift of consciousness happened about, I would say, about year and a half back. So that shift of consciousness, you actually know that you are that vast consciousness. And again, a lot of things beyond this are very difficult to bring it out to you, but it has happened.
It can be only realized.
Yes. So when that shift of consciousness happened, a lot of times you basically have to tease out. You have to tease out what kind of energy fields you're dealing with. The energy field which is just jumping around and creating a noise, versus you tease out all these energy fields and then you reach to a spot where there are no waves. It may be very small, and I'm giving, there may be a lot of geographical frames and figures, geometrical figures will come across, but they come and go. they don't have to be described, and everyone will have a different experience. But that's not the point. The point is to reach to a state where you actually feel the non-dual nature. So to me, it happened. Again, sharing it again can misguide people, so don't think that that's the way it's going to happen to some people, or you might already have gone through this and not experienced. It doesn't matter. So for me, it was a very irregular but squares, but so many squares put onto each other kind of experiences. But then all the way right through that, like a tunnel, you see a non-dual sphere, basically, or non-dual existence, consciousness. So you basically just descend down there. Again, it's all it's very difficult to explain. So the words are not even enough to explain. But you go in that route, and little by little, just the waves disappear, all these figures disappear, and you are in the non-dual state. And that's when all the deep pleasures starts coming out for no reason. The first thing that I came across was the well, like a well of satisfaction. And I had no explanation. What am I satisfied about? I had no explanation. You just satisfied for no reason. In a traditional way, in the material world, you want something, you make efforts to achieve that, and once you achieve, you are happy. So the happiness was at the end. But here, I had not done anything. And I was not going by all the knowledge or all the teachings or nothing like that. It was happening. And I had no control on it. Why was it happening? I don't know. But it was happening. So that, like a continuous well, the water just like coming out, like that satisfaction was springing. I don't know why, but it was there. And I had no way of knowing why it started, and there was no stopping it either. It was just flowing. All these experiences happen. Emotionalism always builds into it. One of the Facebook's readings that I had read was, I forgot who was the speaker. He said, because Sushma reads a lot on the Facebook. I don't go on Facebook that much, but it appealed to me that guy said...
Wayne Dyer?
No, it was not Wayne Dyer. There was some another spiritual guy that he said that unless you have cried spontaneously, you are not on the path of spirituality. No matter how much you believe it, the spontaneous cry of emotional, it may not, I don't know, but it just happens. So one day I had finished my jogging, and right near the entrance of the parkage, we have nice wooded area, and there is a huge log has fallen down. So a lot of times I climb up there and sit there into meditation. That day somehow I was not very well prepared for my talk, and yet it had to happen. So I was still dabbling with what to say, and in the sense like material was there, but I just was not synchronized enough, because every time I give a talk, I have to be synchronized with the consciousness. Otherwise, it just doesn't come out right. I may say the same thing, but the depth and the strength of speaking is not there. So I was kind of fumbling, and then all of a sudden, one thing I had heard from Osho many months back, suddenly it came into my mind. And what he had said was that sayana kauwa gande gade pari baithta hai. So literally speaking, sayana means somebody who is very smart, clever, connive, that he can make bucks in the society, can cheat to his advantage, all the games of chess, politics, all these things is sayana. And kauwa is known to be sayana. He's always like over smart. He tries to prove you that he's better than you. But you know, ultimately what he does? He sits on a gande gada. You know, a donkey always, because of the carrying a lot of load, they always have ulcers on their back, unfortunately. And there are always bugs sitting there, the flies are sitting there, maggots are sitting there. He will always go and sit on the gada, but he will never sit on a beautiful horse. He doesn't find it appealing. So it kind of hooked me that mind keeps on going after sansar, where there is nothing to gain. And whatever you gain is always going to be taken away from you. All the efforts that you go through, all the suffering that you go through, all the sacrifices you make, you may sacrifice your beautiful nature, you might have, no, I got to go to work, or whatever may be the case, but mind always keeps on going after all this stupid things that which doesn't even come to you most of the times. 1 out of 100 desires get fulfilled, 99 remains unfulfilled. And then whatever you get, even that is not good anymore because the other 99 will remain unsatisfied. So this is why the mind operates. It's such a stupid thing. And yet mind thinks that it is very smart. So I said it fits right into that. And my God, at that point, what happened was, it's like, the floodgates opened up and there is a lot of water just gushes through. And like the first monsoon rain comes and all the dirt on the way, all the fallen tree limbs and broken twigs and all that, everything gets washed away. And I had like a huge bath in spirituality. Just the divinity takes you over and you cry. And that day, my sister and my brother-in-law were visiting from India, and I gave a talk on that. They said that was amazing. So again, all these things are experiences. When unexpected things happen, that's when it takes you, caught you off the guard. So reaching to the deeper states of consciousness and the existence is 50-50. It's you have to make efforts because, like I said, God is totally dispensable. You can do without God. But if you want to have God, you have to make efforts. And efforts are not generated by the consciousness. Consciousness is always there. Consciousness cannot move. To do any kind of efforts by the consciousness, you're missing the point. Consciousness cannot perform anything. Why? Because consciousness is everywhere. It cannot move anywhere. There is no movement at the consciousness level because it's infinite. Wherever it goes, it will find itself. Right? So the movement is the perception at the mind level. So far we've been running and running and running. So for us, all these motions which are happening are illusions. But only if you transcend the mind, you realize that it's an illusion. So it was all built in, just like when you go to sleep at night, and in the sleep you might go to Himalayan mountains or Switzerland, or you won $1 million. You haven't gone anywhere. It was all a dream. So that's how I started looking at the life as a dream. So the depth of consciousness starts going deeper and deeper and deeper. So the journey still goes on. So I got the concept of Advait more at the mind level, but once in a while you get these sparks of consciousness that comes and gives you a little prasad. So 50% is your effort, but the other 50% has to come from him. There is no way you can say that I did enough efforts and how come I'm not there, because it's just not you. And you may try to explain, but whatever may be your background and whatever you did, all the reading, nothing to do with that. Sometimes it can happen to somebody without any of these things. So whatever comes is a total prasad from consciousness. And when it happens, so you have to remain in a state where you are available. You have to be in an offering state. And receiving. You have to keep your ego low all the time.
Offering, say, or receiving?
No, offering in the sense, offering to God.
Okay.
Means I am available. You do whatever you want to do. That's what I'm saying. Like you are offering to God.
Same. That is the receiving state. What he is explaining, offering is the receiving
right.
state.
Like an epiphany.
Well, see,
you are offering to receive.
Right, no. When you and the God are two separate things, you are at the receiving end. Okay, give me something. But when you're offering, let's say, okay, my ego, yourself is gone. That's it. So you remain that state as much as you can. I'm not saying that I'm in that state all the time. Day-to-day life also takes me away and all that. But if you remain that state, these miracles happen. I call it miracle because miracles are something that it cannot be explained by the material things, because the matter we perceive by the five senses, that's easy to relate to each other. But this experience is, I cannot, relate to you unless you experience yourself.
Okay.
So again, so this thing started happening. So, and then time to time, one day I was just not too long ago, right? It's like I'm looking at the thoughts. The thoughts are coming and going. So far the focus was always on the thoughts. Okay, thoughts are coming, thoughts are here, and thoughts are going. Yes, I am separate. I am looking at the whole thing. I am the consciousness. I am the consciousness self, without any boundaries, everything. And I'm enjoying that state. But I know the thoughts are still going. So that you don't go beyond the thoughts. Then suddenly it started making me realize that where are the thoughts coming from? So all of a sudden, my focus was more going into the agya state. The agya state is like gnat, agnat, and agya. Gnat is known at the mind level. Agnat is not known at the mind level, but it can be known. With enough efforts, you can teach me, I can know. Or I can learn some other ways or whatever. But gnat and agnat, we all know. But agya is a totally mysterious field. That's where all the logic and explaining and teaching and learning, all these things disappear. It's just a huge, huge field, like a total consciousness.
That's where the offering stage is very important.
Yes, yes.
That's where receiving turns into offering.
Right, yeah. So at that level, the agya state started becoming real to me. So I thought that these thoughts are coming from somewhere and they're going somewhere. So this huge field, agya field, what is it? It's a storehouse that we'll never be able to understand. And that's when I realized why these achieved sages and all that are called mystics. Because they have experienced the mystic field. The field of mystery starts opening up. And that's when the beauty starts. Because so far, I could, whatever my experience, I could share and teach and all that. But that's when a agya field starts touching you. It's hands down, it's like divine experiences. So I started experiencing that agya field, and that again was spontaneous. It's not that I had calculated, I wanted, nothing like that.
It will never come that way.
Your desires or wish has no value, right? So one day after I experienced the agya in a couple of times, when I was in a hot tub, my favorite spot in the winter time, and we have outdoor hot tub, right? So I was just lying down, and all of a sudden the snow started coming in. As if these snowflakes were coming from unknown, we don't know where it's coming from. And I started crying. I said, it's just the God touching you. And all these things started with my journey as a science student. I would have never believed where I am now, and yet that's the reality. So again, all these experiences are building up. Time to time, I have been able to maintain the self-realized state throughout the day, most of the times. But sometimes I lose it. Thought starts, and old monkeys, mind is a monkey, it keeps on dragging you. That doesn't mean you have to give up. Things are going to happen. But ultimately, when you realize these beautiful fields and beautiful experiences you come across, then you realize that none of the objects of the pleasure outside can make you have that kind of experience.
Objects, individuals, and
situations, right. So again, that's when meditation comes into the picture. Like up until like yesterday, I was not sure whether I'll be able to give this talk until I ran 5 miles this morning. I sat down, the energy charged up, the meditation happened, and all my garbage disappeared from the mind, and then again I became into divine state again. So that's why they say you have a better control on your energy field. It's nothing but energy. Every single thing is energy. All your thoughts are energy. Whether you use the thoughts in liking something is energy. When you use your thoughts in disliking something, is also your energy. You are feeding the energy to likes and dislikes. That's when you realize that likes and dislikes are so feeble, has no value. In a moment, liking can become disliking, disliking can become liking. All these sudden things can happen. It's all shift of consciousness, but yet you are not out of it. If you like something, you run towards it. If you dislike something, you run away from it. But you still think that there is something this society, the sansar, has to offer to you. And that's the Patanjali calls abhinivesh. Abhinivesh is the lust for life. That lust for life never disappears until you have something bigger, because lust of life is built into our mind.
Passion is different than lust. Most people think passion and lust is same.
Right, passion
we'll
can be beyond.
That class.
So the thing is that when you realize that lust for life itself is a foolish thing, that's when the steadiness starts. Because if you hear so much that okay, you should hate money. Hating money doesn't do any good, because the money is still in the center. You say, okay, this thing is not good, alcohol is not good, or this is not good, this is good, this is not good. Good and bad does not take you anywhere. In fact, creating opinions about it also does not take you, because you're keeping your mind occupied all the time. But when you realize that all these fluctuations were because your innermost desire that you will get something from samsara, and that falls apart because whatever you got went away. So that requires a lot of wisdom, a lot of awareness. And that awareness, now I realize, going back right from the beginning, any step you take, the awareness was always there, even without me knowing it. Because when I started meditating, the awareness started becoming more real. But before that, even when I picked up the first book and I read on Aurobindo, and then I was comparing, I was paying attention to exactly what my mind is doing. My mind is reading the book. My mind is trying to analyze. My mind is trying to put it into the day-to-day life and all these things. But all along in the background, the awareness was functional. So any step you take in life, if you do it with awareness, there is a lot to learn from it. But then when I started doing meditation, it was very difficult in the beginning because I had not started SSY. So I was going by the, whatever limited background I had from the Chinmanans and all that. This I stumbled across was the awareness. So first I realized that awareness is like an arm. You extend from your own end, at your own end to another person, touching, for example. And then it reflects back. Without my awareness, I cannot even know who is across me. Now at the mind level, my hand that was extending out and coming back was the awareness. So I started analyzing the awareness itself. So I started folding my awareness back into itself. So I started becoming more aware of my awareness. That was the great, powerful tool that I acquired on my own to realize that then I don't have to be aware of the world. I'm just aware of my own awareness. Now, awareness, and then later on I started playing with the existence. Because when you are deep into meditation, you realize you're not only aware, but you also exist. That at a very, very subtle level, you realize your existence. So I started playing with the two. I started becoming aware of my existence, and I realized that awareness does exist. So both the things helped me a lot walking away from the samsara. And then now I realize that awareness itself is and he says, no, the awareness is at the mind level. I said, no, because you can be aware of your mind too. We know our mind. Mind has its own moods. Sometimes you are happy, sometimes you are depressed, sometimes you are angry, sometimes whatever. Those are the moods of the mind, the swinging. When you go deep in, the awareness goes way back. So that's when I started realizing it's a help coming from mysterious Tao, or whatever Tao Te Ching they call the mysterious field where whole world originated. So a lot of things come. Then of course came then I realized that all this logic still has to drop down. But there was no cementing factor. Awareness was there, but something else was needed, and that was the love. Without love, you cannot cross the bridge into the mysterious field. Because love, hands down, is the most beautiful tool. Not only you enjoy, but you're ready to drop all your conditions when you have love for someone. And I'm not talking about the love that asks anything in return. I'm talking about the love that just unconditional, whatever it is, like a mother and child love and things like that. So a lot of times you don't realize that you are capable of doing it. And yet we don't never try because we always think that, oh, I have to lose something if I do this, if why do I have to give up my ego and things like that. So the best solution I realized was just to give out love without even asking anything for return. So going through the Anahat Chakra, which is the love, and you go to the Vishuddha Chakra. So a lot of times you realize all this energy going up and down and all that. And then of course starting the sasar starts opening up. Then you feel that you are nothing but the consciousness. The sansar disappears, of course mind is gone, the body is gone, and you, if at all you have to, you kind of synchronize with whatever is going around. The noises don't bother. Once I was sitting and meditating in the outside on the rocks, and the birds are chirping and this is chirping, all of a sudden you feel that you chirped. Like you don't see the difference between yourself and the birds anymore. You just expand and expand and expand. So all these things are beautiful, and then whatever things are coming from mysterious, I still have to go further deep and we'll see
It's
how
a
that
long
goes.
journey.
It's a long journey.
Okay, I will add few things.
Are women a gay?
I'm going to add few things,
Are
okay?
women a gay?
What's that?
Are women a gay?
A
Are
gay?
they ever
A
known?
gay.
Okay, please, please,
A
please.
gay.
A gay.
Unknowable.
Unknowable.
Yes.
Friends, Agnay, we will talk that. The why we told Mr. Shah to share this. The point I'm trying to tell you,